Okay, good afternoon. Can I welcome you to the meeting of the Learning Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee? Item 1, welcome and apologies. Can I have the apologies, please, Ros?
Yes, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillors Phil Seaborn, Pam Cameron and Steve Brooks. Thank you, Chair.
Item 2, declarations of interest. Can I introduce Linda Willis, our legal officer, please, to take us through the members' declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chair. They're quite general matters before you, I think, today, so I'm not anticipating that there are likely to be any personal interest declared, although I appreciate as the debate goes on, sometimes an interest may become apparent. I just advise members to declare as at that time, and of course it has to be relevant to the business. So I hope that's helpful.
Item 3. Minutes of the previous meeting. You have the minutes there in front of you. Minutes of the meeting held on Thursday the 25th of February. Shall I just go through them first of all? Page 5, page 6, 7, page 8, page 9 and page 10. You're happy to approve those minutes? Item 4 then. Agenda item 4 then is the action sheet. You can see there were no actions from the special meeting. So we move on then to agenda item 5, which is the update report. It's the progress and the impact of the accepted recommendations. And this is really to update members on the progress made on the recommendations that we've made in previous scrutiny committees, whether they've been accepted or have been considered by the executive. Should we start then with the first item? Oh, sorry. Dermot Crystal, who is here to take any questions or comments. Is the scrutiny item, the commissioning arrangements with the EAS. You can see there the total number of recommendations we made was 7, and 5 of those recommendations have been implemented. There were no recommendations rejected, and 2 are to be considered. Sorry, Councillor Cameron?
Just to say, I mean, I don't think, I'm not quite sure that I have to declare an interest. One of the items here is the recommendation was to form an risk and audit committee for the EAS, and I was the person nominated by this council, and I am now the chair of that risk and audit committee.
We'll make a note of that. Have the recommendations there in front of you, the recommendations that have been accepted. Are there any comments or queries? You're generally happy with the recommendations there that have been accepted and the progress that's been made against those recommendations?
Chair?
Councillor Davis?
Yes, can I go to recommendation 6, please? Which is on page 18. Page 19, sorry. And there are other similar items on this, which this is about informing, raising aspiration of parents have for their children, and the service area should set up a parents group to specifically look at ways to communicate school performance information to parents. It's also mentioned in a few other places as well. And so the question is, why haven't we been able to set up this committee? Are there challenges to setting up? And also, who decides on the membership of the committee?
They did say to be considered. What are your considerations for that?
In a sense, Chair, and thanks for that last point you raised, the membership of such groups are one of the biggest considerations of them, so that we get a representative group of parents. Clearly, at a time when we're out to consultation with parents around specific issues, there's always a danger that we may have a skewed representation on particular parents' groups. So that's always one of the considerations. How do we actually go out there? We've got a number of mechanisms within Council in terms of looking at electronic collaboration and consultation with the parents, which we think might be the best way of moving forward on this, because it'll give us a much wider group of parents that we can access. We have had also discussions with individual groups of parents in the past around additional learning needs. And some of the issues we've had there, again, have been about getting a truly representative group, which has always been a bit of an issue, to be frank. So I think one of the issues for us, Chair, is going to be, if we have a standing group of parents, how can we ensure that we're not getting that skewed view? How can we make sure that that's representative? And getting a typical group of parents, therefore, is somewhat problematic. So I think we're looking at wider scale ways of reaching parents and engaging with them around a host of issues. And clearly, and really importantly, schools have a requirement on them to consult with parents as well. So we're working with heads to look at how we can make sure that when schools are consulting with parents, we can almost tap into that. And I think that's an ongoing piece of work. I don't think we're going to get to a position where we're going to have a committee of parents other than for specific items, because I don't think we can really get to a truly representative group. So we need to agree with heads how we can collectively look at our communication strategy with parents on a general basis, if that covers that point.
Yes. Because as I said, it's one of those things we all say about raising aspirations. Sometimes this is a personal opinion about concerns. The many people's concern is about the lack of aspiration. But one of my personal concerns sometimes is the nature of aspiration. It's a thing which I talked about, and I've certainly been quite vocal about in this committee, is that people are more concerned about being better than that lot over there, rather than just being better, rather than just helping their children to improve and to make the most of what they have. That they're more concerned with just, oh, well, as long as we're better than that lot over there, we're okay. So would you say that that there may be part of this would also be to address that issue as well?
I think it is, and I think that's why it's important that what we do, we don't do singularly just as the education service, that we do through schools, because the whole issue of aspiration is clearly part of the agenda for all educational establishments in the borough. There is an issue about how people gauge aspiration and look at it and how they compare. I accept that. I always come back to the example that we've rehearsed here before, that when we went into special measures, we had 7 or 8 bits of correspondence in from the general public, but when we talk about school reorganisation, if I put it in that way, we tend to have many times that. So there is an issue for us in terms of raising aspiration. The best way I think we're going to tackle that is in terms of how we continue to work with our head teachers to look at increasing the outcomes, improving the outcomes for our children, making sure that all parents and governing bodies, and that's something again that we've touched on before, are fully aware of what our aspirations are, what our targets are, and then also a part of the discussion about how we raise aspirations across the borough. We've said, as an education service, we intend to be, our aim is to be a good education authority within 2 years. Within the business plan, and it was a recommendation one, but if I can go back there for a second, the EAS business plan now has 3-year targets within it. I'm not sure we've really made everybody aware of exactly what the business plan is there, but it's quite a dense document. I think we probably have more to do about making sure that everyone's aware of where we think every school in Torvine is going to be over the next 3 years. So we're looking at how we can extract those targets and get those on our website, make sure that we raise awareness there, but that's not the same as raising aspiration. So I think that's an ongoing discussion with schools about how do we get greater community involvement in every school, so that parents understand that schools aren't threatening, scary places to be. They're really open and welcoming places, and get them involved in the life of schools and open that dialogue with the communities in a way that I don't think we've been successful to this point.
And then Jeff.
Just to ask, I mean, I know it's a bit of an old chestnut, but have we looked at other authorities, and have we used the EAS to perhaps look at other authorities in the South East Wales cluster to see if there's somebody doing it better than us? You know, I mean, there's communications between parents and schools, I think.
I think we need to hold on to, again, we've got really good examples of schools in Torvine who are doing a really fantastic job. So in terms of our school-to-school work and the whole work around self-improving systems, that's a theme of what we look at in terms of how do we make sure we get that engagement with ultimately our customers. These are the people who we're serving. So to make sure that they're not just aware, but they're also involved in setting the agenda going forward. So in our most successful schools, I think that is a feature of where those schools are going. We are showing that practice. We have a lot of school-to-school work going on in Torvine, and yeah, we absolutely do talk to the rest of the consortium and between consortia as well about what good practice looks like. So just for a second, Chair, one of the things that we've recently done is the 5 directors of education. We've restructured the way we work together, and we've taken this through the joint executive group. So it's been through the 5 exec members for education in South East Wales, and pulled together a number of subgroups that will look at collaborative work across the 5 authorities. And one of those is on school improvement. We want on additional learning needs, finance, and so on. And those groups are also looking at how we can build on that best practice across the 5 authorities in a number of different areas.
Sorry.
I sort of read this recommendation perhaps in a bit different way. So for me, it's sort of suggesting that the local authority sets up a kind of a focus group of a small number of parents to try and find out from them what would be the best way that the local authority communicate directly with parents around aspiration. That's my reading of this more. What's your view of that?
That wasn't quite the interpretation we had. What we've looked at in the past is obviously having standing groups of parents, and it goes back probably 10 years the last time we had a standing consultative group, and that was around ALN. That was problematic and ceased to exist. So in terms of a 1 or 2 off exercise with groups of parents to look at how we raise aspirations, we could do that, but with all the caveats that I've given before. It's determining, is that a proportionate way of getting a valuable message back? Our experience has been that that probably wouldn't be the case.
No, it was more about the method of communication, how to reach parents, rather than what the message was.
I think what you said is actually how we generate the message, so how we actually tap into parents in terms of looking at how we can raise aspiration. I think, Councillor Rees, is what you were saying. I'm not quite sure.
What I'm saying is that we could, what I'm suggesting is that perhaps we could sort of get a focus group, maybe 10, 15 parents, representative of schools throughout the borough, and find out what media they access, how we could possibly get our message into that kind of media, how we can communicate with them more effectively, rather than actually what the message is at the moment.
I think the question is, we already know all the means by which we can get messages to parents. So the communication itself, I don't think, is the core issue. So we've got all the access to all the, to every media that we need to. I think the original discussion, and if I'm misinterpreting, then please committee let me know, was about how we raise aspirations and then communicate that and make sure we get some, build a sort of head of steam behind that. So I'm not sure that asking parents how they would like us to communicate with them would add anything to what they already tell schools, because obviously we ask schools, how do you communicate with your parents, what are your favourite options, and be that email, be that on Facebook or other social media, be that through pupil post, or be it via direct mail shots. I think we've got all those covered. I think the real issue that we've talked about as a committee over the last 2 years, and through the recovery board process as well, was about how do we engender a greater sense of urgency amongst parents in general, and ownership of what happens in schools and how we raise aspirations. So I think, for the reasons I've already stated, that's something that we're still working on. We've chosen to do that through HEAD and looking at what's happening in individual schools. Chair, could I just say, if committee really wants us to have a 1 or 2 off event with a group of parents, and we'll invite some committee members into that, that's not an issue. We just think there's probably more effective ways of achieving the outcome that we were looking for. But that really isn't a problem. We can organise that quite quickly and do that if committee feels that's still good value.
What I want to try and be clear on, really, is that if we know that we need to raise the aspirations of parents, and we've known that for 2 years, And you've also said that we know the methods that the schools use, and we're assuming, or it's being assumed that those methods are working. Why are we waiting?
I think if we were to suggest, and I'm not suggesting you're saying this, but raising aspirations isn't about telling people that they should care more or that they should have higher aspirations. That's clear. If it were as simple as that, then we'd send out an email to everyone and that would be job done. Now, clearly that's not the business we're in. This is a very complex issue about, well, there was lots of different reasons why people aren't as engaged in, and lots of parents are, and that's the important bit. Lots and lots of parents clearly are. But in terms of raising aspirations, I think it's a really complex question about why some parents don't come into school, why some parents don't do homework with their children, some parents don't know what level their child is functioning at in school, even though they've been told that. So I think there's a variety of different reasons why that is the case at the moment. What we've chosen to do, both within the service and through the Children and Young People's Partnership, Partnership Board, is to look at how can we have a collective message coming from schools and the wider partnership about how do we reach parents to get greater levels of engagement with education across the piece. That's through the youth service, as well as the education service, the play service, what's happening in Brennan we're also looking at in terms of literacy and how we can support development of literacy on a wider sort of basis. So I think we're looking for a more broad church approach to try and reach parents and the community in general, people who aren't parents, to be more interested in what's happening in the education of children in the borough.
So generally, are you happy with the impact that we've had on the service area? Anything you wish to raise? No?
As far as recommendation 6, we don't seem to have had an impact, have we?
We're still a little bit doubtful about recommendation 6, yeah.
Would you like to leave that on there then for the next round of progress updates on recommendations, and perhaps further down the line we'll have more to add to that?
I need to come back in at that point and ask me how I need to ask you as a committee how you're going to measure the impact yourselves, because in terms of raising aspirations, what measure do you suggest that we use to measure that increased aspirations of parents in this borough?
I was going to say, if we've got the specific in regarding what we are asking to do, and I'm not sure how to progress that, I must be honest.
So Jim mentioned earlier that you're working with heads on a communication strategy with heads.
No, I said we're working with heads to look at how we can raise aspirations. Heads already communicate, schools already communicate regularly with parents, and that is the most natural form that parents receive communication about schools in. So that is one of the vehicles that we're looking at about how we can get messages out about what's happening in schools, about performance in schools. There isn't a communication strategy per se. It's about how we collectively take responsibility across the whole school's estate for this piece of work.
Is there a way of encompassing the EAS in this in some way, because they do training, etc., for governors, as we know, if you like, and I'm just wondering whether or not another branch could be added to the EAS regarding the supporting of the parents, if you like, knowing that it is a big field, and I'm not sure whether any one particular school is going to have the expertise to deliver it, if you like, and we might be talking about a larger body to actually drive this forward, i.e. the EAS.
Chair, I can just come back to that. Maybe the way that we could look at this, and to go back to what I said earlier about, we have set ourselves the target of being a good authority within 2 years. We've got 3-year targets that we've put into the EAS business plan. That business plan is supported then by activity in schools by the EAS, but also a training programme for schools and obviously for governors. What we haven't done, I think, sufficiently well is really share that. Those are targets. We get tied up in what we mean, the difference between aspirations and targets. But targets are based on where we think we really should be. Those are accurate, fairly accurate predictions of where we think we're going to get to. I think we've work to do there about making sure that parents and all governors are really cognizant of what we said, where we're going to be in 2 years' time, 3 years' time. So I think as a starting point, that is something that we absolutely have to do and get on with. And there's a series of tasks, I think, of actions that we can do within the local authority and with the EAS and others to make sure that that is widely understood. I think that would be a really important first step in really making sure that all parents know, well, hang on a minute, that's where I am at the moment in terms of my child's outcomes. This is where it should be, so that parents are armed with that information so they can ask the right questions and begin to think about, well, where should my child be by the end of this key stage, or wherever their child is in that point of their education.
You're doing at the moment, or you're hoping to do?
That's something that we're now doing, because we've just agreed the business plan has only come through Cabinet this week.
Will you have the results of that? When will that be finished?
So what I'm talking about is making sure that we now, on our website and through other means and through schools, is look at how we get those 3-year targets out to everybody so it becomes part of our currency in our discussion with parents. So there's a series of ways we can do that. We can certainly report back on what we've done around those activities. The impact of that in terms of measuring aspiration, I will struggle to demonstrate that we've raised aspiration because I don't think that's easily achieved.
I mean, I've got to agree with Dermot. It is almost impossible to say that you've raised aspiration in a definitive sense. I am loath to start collecting statistics for the sake of statistics. But I think if we are successful in managing to raise the aspirations of both teachers and parents, but particularly parents, we will see a greater take-up of attendance of parents at school parent-teachers meetings and that sort of thing, because that is, if they are aspiring parents, they want to know where their kids are and they will make that effort. But would I be happy to have anecdotal evidence that says, this school and this school have managed to raise the number of parents coming to PTAs? Because I would hate for them to turn around and say, well, look, I want all this measured. Because I know we don't measure, that sort of statistic at the moment. But, I think that is a sort of a guideline of where we would be if we are actually raising aspirations, particularly amongst parents.
Chair, if you like, because what's already in place, if you like, to a certain degree, or to a large degree as well, if you like, but we've got, when it comes to the governors and link governors in regarding the supporting the most able and talented pupils, if you like, and so if I was a parent, I would possibly be saying, well, does my child fall into that category? If not, well, where else do I turn to, if you like? And so, for me, it's a case of we should be supporting the parents, if you like, up and beyond, if you like, that category, which, if you like, there are statistics because we've been asked for them at the end of the day, and there is support. And so, but basically, I think we've got to look at the support which is given to parents, if you like, within the school, up and beyond, if you like, that just that one category.
Councillor Smith.
Borrow this microphone, before I quietly slip away shortly. I'd have thought, to me, I'm not an educationalist, but the way to measure aspiration and change in levels of aspiration is to ask the children. Ask them what their aspirations are. And if you did that over a series of years, then it may be the case that it actually starts to trend. If kids are being, if parents have high aspirations for their children, then if that to mean anything, they'd have to translate that to their children by encouraging them with the homework, that kind of stuff, the good parenting things that you might imagine. Well, if that's occurring, then that should be noticeable in the various cohorts at school. So you just ask the kids and say, well, what do you hope to be when you grow up? And perhaps they go up from, elevate from this to this. And if we see the number of people aspiring to be brain surgeons going from 1% to 10%, well, whoa, that's I would argue, an increase in aspirations. It's just a thought. I mean, I'm just throwing it in. But there you've got a population of people, and you can ask them. You can just ask them, because they're there at school.
Some interesting comments. I need to come back on there, if that's okay, Chair. A world full of brain surgeons and no one else. I'm not sure. I think the purpose of education is about preparing children, equipping children with self-esteem and with a range of skills that enables them to fulfil what they want to do in their lives and to be a productive part of society. That means some children, lots of children, will clearly take a vocational route, which is absolutely appropriate and as valuable as any other route, and some will take a more academic route and go off into different roles. So I'm not sure I agree on the hierarchy of one job being more valuable than another as being a measure of anything, perhaps not aspiration. I'm not sure we'd have too many musicians, for example, if we went down that road, or linguists or anything else. So asking the children is a good idea, and that's something we can look at. The issue for us here is about what does aspiration mean, how do you get an objective measure of increase, what's more important than another. The issue obviously with asking children, as asking adults as well, is your view changes over time, and each view might be legitimate for where you are at that point in your life, and that's appropriate. It doesn't mean that one's better than another. So I think that this is an area that's laden with difficulty in terms of getting objective measures. In terms of attendance at meetings, I would just give you, I would pose back some information that I think is pertinent then. I don't think there's been a decrease, and certainly schools anecdotally aren't reporting there's been a decrease in attendance at parents' events, and because I would say school concerts are as much an important part as going to meet the teacher, for example, over the last 10 years. And if you look at obviously our performance over the same period, I'm not sure we've seen a change in parental behaviour in the majority of schools, although there are obviously some variations in that across different schools. But we don't measure it. If we were to ask schools to do that, it would have to be an ask. There's a workforce agreement in place about asking schools to collect data, which is to make sure their teachers are focused on what they need to do. I'm not sure what validity that would have, as I say, because you could still have people who are coming to school because they think that's the right thing to do, and they'll dutifully come along. It doesn't mean you raise aspirations necessarily, would be one of the arguments I think put back to us. So in order to try and bring some sort of action to this, what I'll undertake is that I'll raise this as an issue with the South East Wales Consortium and with the EAS to see what other people are doing in terms of have they got objective measures, is there any actions that they're doing to try and get a baseline and we can measure against. If committee feels that it would be valuable to bring a few groups of parents in, with all the caveats I said about representation earlier, then we'll do that. We'll try and do it over the summer when the parents might be more available. And we'll have that discussion with them. If one or two of the committee members would like to join us for those, I think that would be really useful to sort of just have that discussion as well. And then I'll report back at a subsequent meeting.
Sorry.
If we're trying to raise aspiration, that means we're trying to get a message around aspiration out to the community. So one way to do it would be to sort of have a focus group sort of to measure people's understanding of what school aspiration for the children would be now, and then do the campaign around increasing aspiration, which you suggested you'll do through publicity, and then measuring the focus group after that to see if there's been any change. If there's been any change, it's been successful, or aspiration is more widely understood and known in the community, then it hasn't been, then it hasn't worked. So that's a way to do it.
Are there comments that you wish to make about that, the recommendations we've made? And you're happy with the overall summary of the impact on the service improvement that's taken place?
Chair, just to...
Okay.
The same with recommendation 2, but I was thinking that maybe we could do that recommendation 2 could maybe work in with the teacher assessment policy thing on later on, Key Stage 2 and 3, we could do with that.
item under review, the additional learning needs review, the consultation. And you can see there the recommendations. We made 5 recommendations, and 4 were implemented. There were no recommendations rejected, and there was 1 to be considered. So, any comments on this item? Sorry, Nigel.
Saying that about the prefer units, key stage 2, was it page 22, about bringing back to us any significant change which has been done.
Chair, I think that's a point that we need to accept. The discussions that we got to with head teachers was that we weren't looking at a PRU. This isn't just an issue of semantics, and I need to sort of explain. One of the things that the committee were quite rightly concerned about, and this was brought up in the recovery board, and it's certainly a concern I shared as well, is that we didn't establish another pupil referral unit. Pupil referral units, as you know well, are meant to be short-term placements. The phrase used in the vernacular is a revolving door, which is sometimes referred to as a revolting door because it doesn't seem to work. Pupils go in and get stuck. And if you look at the issues we've had with our own Key Stage 3, 4, we've had some success at moving youngsters back into school at Key Stage 3, and we've reduced the number of pupils coming through significantly over time to the PRU. It's much smaller than when it was first set up. We clearly do have an issue at Key Stage 4 where pupils rarely go back into into a mainstream school setting, although we have looked at early college placements and other types of placements for them. So we did not want, and I don't want to have a primary PRU. So what we discussed with schools, and there was an ongoing focus with heads, and a group of heads together with the Crown Bridge head, Leslie Bush, and Tracy Peterman, local authority, was looking at developing an assessment centre for young people, which would be very time limited, which would be based on part of a progressive response to a child's difficulty and to schools, because this isn't just about within child issues, this may be a schools issue, of looking at how we could provide a centre that would support children developing their skills and teachers. So this would be very much about staff coming in and children coming in on very time-limited interventions. So, I have to accept we could have brought back, I think we may have put it in the basket, but I can't recall, but we could have brought back at least a written update on that, and I accept we should really have done that, and we certainly can provide that in short order.
Other than to say, really, I think we could do with an update. It is a very important issue. It is still to a degree a work in progress, and we could do with an update.
Members happy with that?
Just as a point of information, one of the key issues that we looked at in the original proposal was the potential that the moderate learning difficulties resource spaces currently located at Maindy, Pont Newydd and Sacken schools come under the auspices and governance of Crown Bridge. Now I wrote back to the head teachers and chairs of governors of those schools that following the initial period of consultation we weren't minded to do that because they were engaging with Crown Bridge and looking at a joint piece of work around self-evaluation and around curriculum and assessment. But just to update you, we've never taken that option away, and we, both Councillor Young and myself, will be meeting with the head teachers and heads of resource bases straight after Easter to look at progress in each of those resource bases. So if we're going to bring you an update, I suggest it would be helpful to have it after those have happened so we can give you a more informed picture.
I think I need to declare. Did you mention Pont Newydd School then, if you like, I'm a governor at Pont Newydd School?
The next item then, attendance and management in schools. We considered this report in November 14. We made 10 recommendations and I think they're all being considered.
Well, I think the main one is I think applies both to this and also the later one about the draft sickness policy. Is do our schools have the each school have the administrative wherewithal to manage these to manage both this issue and the draft sickness policy as well?
I was looking at the sickness absence one, so what was the other one?
Is there enough administrative wherewithal in the schools to manage these policies?
I think so. The issue is that they're required to do so, and that's part of that's part of their responsibility. And how schools choose to structure their own staffing is an issue for the governing body, clearly, in the head teacher. I think some of the key points here is that schools didn't have the tools, and I don't think we corporately had the tools to be able to do this piece of work effectively. So I think nearly all schools now have had their training, individual training from HR and education colleagues to go out. I think there's one or two we're just soaking up. So all the tools and infrastructure is in place now to support schools to be able to do that. There is an ongoing standing group that's looking at this piece of work. In fact, it was on the last head teachers meeting we had a couple of weeks ago, where we were saying, there clearly are some unanswered questions for us in this. We think we should be in a position where the data is now real, because we've had question marks over whether or not we've had an accurate picture. There's clearly been the significant discrepancy is the wrong word, difference between rates of sickness absence, for example, for support staff versus teaching staff. And we've had some instances of zero returns, which either means everyone's extraordinarily well, or that there was an issue with recording. So we're mining down to make sure we've got clean data, so we can really now begin to unpick where we are in terms of what the real issues are. Schools, we've also, as you know, brokered a deal with, I think it's 25 schools have bought into it now to look at a collective agreement around covering absence and supply costs for teachers and support staff. So for us, these are obviously very closely linked. There was a huge amount of resource being lost in terms of sickness absence, some of which clearly is absolutely legitimate, if not all of it, but we can't answer that question until we get the data. But also, more importantly, from my point of view, is that continuity for the learners is clearly being disrupted, and we need to minimise that, as everyone absolutely would wish to do, but there is a lot of time where children are not having that consistency, and we need to understand that. So I think we're making good progress, but there is no simple magic wand where we can fix this overnight. It's getting that clarity and the reality of the data first, and that's where we now are.
And when do you think that we could have a further report on that, of the progress that we've made? Would it be 6 months, or perhaps?
Chair, the difficulty here, this goes back to that, the old issue about we can give you an update on process and where we are with process and implementing some of the things we need to do. In terms of impact, I know that reduction, that's necessarily going to take some time to come through. So, 6 months is, you won't get much evidence then, but we can certainly report back in 6 months, and I would say that clearly as part of I would recommend to committee that as part of the annual basket of things that we look at this as a standing item.
We put it back in our basket to look at as an item. Next item, which is Key Stage 2 and 3, Teacher Assessment Policy. And we scrutinised this in February. And we made 7 recommendations. 1 has been implemented, 1 rejected, and 5 to be considered. Okay.
I wonder, Dermot, if you could just give us a brief run-through of what a moderation exercise actually entails.
what it should entail, or what it is...
What is happening in schools in Torfaen?
What had been happening until recently, and this was a picture that was replicated across Wales, schools were asked, the simpler version, asked to bring along examples of different levels of work. The school. Okay? So, a cynic might suggest, and I'm not looking at anyone in particular, I'll look down, I might suggest, no, cynic, or a skeptic, might suggest that, of course, you'd expect people to take a good example. Just being human, you would expect to take an example you're secure on, with the appropriate evidence. You go in with a group of your peers and you compare that against other level 4 systems, level 4, and have a discussion around, does that fully address the features that gives you this criterion referenced assessment of what constitutes level 4. Now, in the past, there's been some discussion about the nature of 4, and how many elements of those criteria do you need to clearly evidence in order to get a solid 4. That complicates then by the issue about, well, okay, how often do you need to be able to demonstrate all of those elements consistently in your piece of work? So, and of course you're looking at one piece of work. So there's quite an art form to looking at some of that consideration of what makes that level. No random sampling in that. Clearly, the individual schools get to choose what they bring, what evidence they get to choose. They choose what they bring in total. So some of the work we've been doing in Torfaen, and there is a national moderation process underway, is that we have a standing group of heads representative of all sectors of all phases of education, looking at how we can make sure that the moderation process in Torfaen is absolutely as robust as it can be. And that group's still working, so there's further work to do. So some of the things that we've been looking at there do include random sampling. They do include the issue of, if you bring a piece of work and the group disagrees with your judgment, what happens afterwards? Because up to this point, if we all were the moderation group, and we considered your piece of work and you thought it was a level 5, we all thought it was a level 6, for instance, which could happen, but you were adamant it's level 5, we couldn't tell you, we couldn't do anything to change what happened back in your school. So our schools have said, well, hang on a minute, we need to have something there that says, if we're all agreeing that's a 5, you think it's a 6 or vice versa, then someone needs to change that. So that's something that we're trying to figure out here in Torfaen, because until there's a change in the legislation or a change in the guidance, clearly we can't tell schools to change their own assessment. So that's something that we're working through in terms of school-to-school, the school-to-school piece of work that's going on at the moment. And obviously we're working with the EAS. So we're sort of piloting in parallel for the region as well. Is that a... That's what it is.
If there was sort of a difference of opinion in the moderation group, wouldn't the challenge advisor have some say in that?
They would have an opinion that they could offer. But in terms of being able to say, no, that is a 5, that's the professional judgment of that school. The moderation process is there, obviously, to support professional development, because it's a way of actually sharing good practice and sharing that learning. But the EAS don't have a right to say to a school, that's wrong. That's clearly something that we, as an education community in Torfaen, are not entirely comfortable with, and that's the piece of work we're looking at on an ongoing basis. Heads in Torfaen are most heads, I think it's fair to say, majority of heads, that's less than most, the majority of heads, I think are comfortable with the idea of random sampling, for instance, and also for looking at, when the collectivists say, look, that's a 4, that's a 5, whatever, that's what it is. So that should be changed back at base, and that's some of the work that's ongoing.
I know it's difficult, I'm really not trying to put you on the spot. Have we got any idea on the timescale of getting to a sort of total policy everybody accepts? Moderation's
in May, so that's when the moderation process, so we'll have finished our update guidance from that group imminently, so it'll be ready for that moderation process. So again, once we have an update from that group, Chair, we can bring that back and distribute it in written form and then pick it up at a subsequent meeting, if that's helpful.
Karen, sorry.
I don't have actually any evidence, but I'm hearing anecdotal evidence, if you like, that whilst I'm looking now at item 1, the accepted recommendation, and I am happy to say that I agree with what you're saying in the impact. Over the years, local authorities improved the transfer procedures to enhance the transition process and allow individual pupils to feel valued and well prepared for their next stage of education. However, I am hearing evidence that there is still issues with this, in that the secondary schools are getting the pupils in, they are showing them they're giving them some sort of idea of what the school is like. But when the pupils get there, they are finding that it is a lot more different than the impressions they were getting from their periods at the school. Suddenly, whereas at primary they have a teacher who's there and attentive and helping them, suddenly they're getting, read that. And it's what you would expect at a secondary school. There is an enormous difference. And I appreciate that it is very difficult to impart that difference in the amount of time that secondary schools have to do it. But I'm still getting this anecdotal evidence, if you like, that there are still an awful lot of pupils who are going from primary to secondary and finding it a big shock. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I think in terms of transition, we've got a number of different pieces of work underway to make sure transition. Sometimes I think we only think about the children themselves, but clearly there's lots of other work around transition in terms of transition of information and making sure that all that preparedness is in place. So we have a number of pieces of work underway that the clusters themselves are leading on, and we've got some really, again, strong examples of very close cluster working in Torvine, and we need to spread that, because not all clusters are working in quite the same way. So there's more work to be done there. We've got transition, a specific transition project around children who are at risk of exclusion, so that anyone who is at risk and is identified in year 5, year 6 really, there's a specific piece of transition work around them, which has seen a significant reduction in exclusions, perhaps at year 7, that we've seen over the last 2 years in particular. But yeah, there's a lot more to be done. And that also includes schools themselves reflecting on how they choose to deliver the curriculum in year 7 and 8. And some schools are looking at how they can change that and look at having a more familiar delivery style for learners. And we're watching those examples with close interest, and again, making sure that we facilitate that discussion across the heads. But this again comes back to us making sure that we celebrate the good practice, of which we have lots in Torvine, and that we encourage those schools who aren't maybe using that practice or haven't engaged in that practice, that they're aware of it and can see the benefit of it for those schools, because ultimately it'll be the governing body and the head teachers decide how staff are deployed and how the school day is delivered, in effect. But yeah, learning from the good practice we already have, and lots of our schools, 4 of our secondary schools are 3 now, are schools challenge recovery schools, so they're linked to schools elsewhere across the region, is important because they're seeing different examples. So we really are trying to make sure that the structural things that we've got control of aren't barriers to children really engaging with the curriculum and having a good start at secondary. But bearing in mind the changes that are coming, both in terms of the pressures on schools, all of our secondary schools are experiencing difficulty with budget, an increasing number of primaries. That's the reality of where we are. We're supporting them to manage that, but that clearly needs changes in their structures over time. We have the Donaldson piece of work ongoing, and that will be bringing change over the next number of years, and there'll be other changes that come along as well. So I think there's more to be done, and there will continue to be, but we try to make sure that we're building on that good practice that exists.
Recommendations on this report. I think we did say that we would like an update on the moderation process. Yeah. So should we leave that on our basket as well to look at?
Chair, could I just suggest on the timing of that again, it would be useful to look at the moderation, how moderation runs this year, and we could, just trying to think of the timing of it, if we've got, I can't remember when our last meeting is, but maybe it's probably going to be in the new cycle by the time we get all the information through. That might be a good one to do, and we could pick that up with the results and maybe put the two together.
And, yeah, and the other thing I was going to say is that right at the very end of this, there's a bit about during the SDM monitoring visit in November 15. The Education Service Area is now working towards addressing the recommendations from the last SDM monitoring visit. Do you think it would be good for us to have an update on whether or not that's completed or where it is? Or? It's right at the... I haven't got... Unfortunately, I got mine from somewhere else. Are we? Oh, sorry, I was... Oh, yeah, my apologies. I've skipped forward. My apologies. I've turned too many pages.
Report on moderation. Yeah, probably in September. Okay. We move on then to the next item, which is probably the one that you were referring to. Progress made against the Eston recommendations from 2011 inspection. We considered this report on the 15th of April, and we made 6 recommendations, and 5 were implemented, none were rejected, and 1 to be considered. So, any comments?
Okay. Into recommendation 4, Arthur, which of course is the issue with NEETs and the measurement of it, which I know that I in particular have spoken about in this committee a few times, and also about how we measure, which of course is asking about the targets and measure relating to the age group and also age-specific rates being tracked. Is that up and running now?
Something that Karen Padfield would be better placed to answer. Shall we park that one a minute and see if Karen comes in for the later item?
Okay.
Are you?
Yeah, sure, because obviously that needs piece of work doesn't directly sit with us, it sits within communities and Karen.
Okay, fair enough, yeah. I think
other than what I said earlier, which is right at the end.
And Chair, obviously on that, we've now come under special measures, so I think either we just didn't see the update box, or there isn't an update box there, or else we made an assumption that we've come under special measures, so that's obviously those recommendations in the November visit. Right, sorry, I've just misread it. Yeah. We can do, I suppose we've covered that elsewhere in that so far. The recommendations that we had were around ensuring that we use the full range of performance measures at Key Stage 4 in particular. Those are now built into the business plan. So across the region we weren't, the ES wasn't regularly reporting on 5A star A's, which is the more able and talented measure, and then the wider point, the average point score. Those are now built in, and that will be part of future reports, and fits within the team plan in particular. So that was the key one. There was another element that's just eluded me, but we can certainly build that into any further update that we give, and that will come through in the reporting cycle when we look at the results in any case.
Okay, we move on to our next item, which was the 24th of June 2015. We made 5 recommendations. Got none implemented, rejected none, to be considered 5. Okay, the policy is in place at the minute, is it? Yeah. We just need an update really with when we do the
we need to make sure that he's fully embedded within the schools and he's working, really. That's...
So are we happy with that one? Move on to the next item, the Draft self-evaluation report on the 30th of September. We made 8 recommendations, 4 were implemented, 1 rejected and 3 to be considered. Say there on agenda on the item 4, the recommendation. I think we have we agreed that we will look at exclusions for our next meeting? Yeah, as part of the work programme.
Just on self-evaluation in general, clearly self-evaluation isn't a one-off process. It's an iterative process that continues over time. It's obviously closely linked into our performance management systems. So we'll be updating our element of the self-evaluation. The self-evaluation in this context refers to the LASKIP framework, which is the Local Authority Education Service and Children and Young People's Partnership self-evaluation. So all one element, Karen and other parts of Dave Connolly's work and others is involved there. And going back to the piece of work I said around how the 5 local authorities, education services are reorganising themselves, we're also looking at how we can better peer support around self-evaluation and support and challenge. So we'll be working with our partners across South East Wales to look at how we can shadow, buddy up, come out and offer challenge sessions across those 4 services, and some of that work's already started. So we'll be drawing up a little protocol around that with other directors. That should be ready probably, I would have thought, from May. So that will only further augment where we are, and also offer an opportunity for other folks who maybe haven't been through Neston recently to come and see how we've done things. It's probably just worth noting as well that as part of ADRI, the Association of Directors of Education in Wales, we, together with the other authorities who come out of special measures, have been asked to give a short presentation to the next ADRI meeting about lessons learned, where we now are in terms of our self-evaluation processes, and how we've moved from where we were to coming out of special measures, because they recognise that's good value for other authorities too. So we'll be augmenting what we do around self-evaluation, and we can give an update on that. Probably, again, if it goes in the basket, we'll be ready to give a full update on our self-evaluation, I would have thought, by year end, and certainly by September, with a view to that the next inspection cycle beginning the following September. So I'd anticipate we'd have at least 2 other updates to that self-evaluation before we get to that point.
So we put this back in our basket for further report. Item is one that we discussed on the 25th of November on school attainment. And I think we've agreed that we perhaps will have a future report on this, of the report, an update.
And Chair, what we typically do, obviously, is give you a full update on performance in schools across the piece in September. As an interim, the early entry results for GCSE English and Mathematics, English, Welsh and Mathematics, are also starting to come in. So I believe Sharon Davis will be sending you, Chair, an update of the picture to date by the end of this week, so certainly before the break or as soon as we get back. So you'll have some interim information as well. But clearly we won't be in a position to give a full update until we have the preliminary data all in by the last week in August. Third week in August is when we get it all in.
A question there on the second recommendation there about the executive member to ensure that minutes and information from head teachers forums are sent to all school governors. Would there be any problem with perhaps members of the committee attending the head teachers meeting, future head teachers meeting, or would that be something that...
I can certainly put that request to heads. The way that we've constructed head teachers meetings for the last 2 years is that we co-construct those agendas together. basically we negotiate that agenda together, so I can't see why that wouldn't be an issue for me to take that request in. I suspect what heads might ask is just say, well, that's fine. What is it you'd like to see? What would you like to get out of those meetings? Because obviously we don't invite chairs of governors or any governors to those meetings as a matter of course, and many of you are, I think all of you are governors. So it would be, what would you want out of that? And I think heads would quite reasonably saying just help us understand what you're after.
Lisa?
I think it's just to find out what's going on. It's not necessarily that we're going to have an agenda on the item or speak or anything like that, but just to hear what's going on.
I'm not sure if that would stifle, though, if like communication, if like in conversation, if like knowing that, if like councillors will be in the same room, and at the end of the day, it's their meeting. So I think it would need to be
Head
put
teachers
to
our
the
interest,
head.
and we'll see where we go from there.
I think it would need to be put to the heads. So,
Chair, can I suggest that maybe what would be really an interesting thing to do, at least from my perspective, you may not agree, is that if you were to go to heads and ask them about their view of maybe some of the questions you've asked me today, and ask them about how they think, some of the things that you've sampled, they think directly could be improved, or what they might like council to do further, might be a really interesting way to open up a discussion, because you have access to the minutes in any case, and those minutes aren't in any way, they are the minutes that go out to everybody. So I think it would be maybe a cheeky suggestion for me, but I think it would be useful to have that discussion with heads, and I think they might really appreciate having members of scrutiny coming in and listening to them and hearing their views about what they would like to see improve, unfiltered by the likes of me.
I was going to say, you won't be.
The structure of the meetings at the moment is that we agree the agenda jointly. The heads meet by themselves for the first hour and a half, just depends on the agenda, and then we are invited to join them when they're ready for us to come in, and we go through the rest of the agenda. So I'm sure there'll be an opportunity for I and my team and the ES not to be there while you have that discussion.
We have the minutes already. We got the minutes sent to us, or how can we get those minutes?
Yeah, we can. They're circulated by I've forgotten Mrs. Wickham's first name. But those are circulated, and we can make sure that you're on that circulation list.
So I think the first thing would be to make sure that we're on the circulation list, and then perhaps we can get together as a committee and see, where we go from there. Jude? Yeah. But we need the minutes first, so we can have a little look and see, get the flavour of what.
So, Chair, in order to make that happen, I think it might be useful. We've got two lead head teachers, one representing primary and secondary, so Simon Bates and David Taylor. And it might be useful just to have for one or several of you to come to that pre-agenda meeting to have that discussion, and then I'll leave that bit of the pre-agenda meeting if you wish, and we can just get that agreed, and those meetings happen on a half-termly basis.
I think at the end of the day, I can see, if you like, the importance of the chair and possibly another member of the committee attending, but to basically go en masse, if you like. I think that possibly could be a bit daunting. I would recommend not recommend, but I don't have a problem with meeting with them. It's a case of who and how many.
I think we've got a positive way forward there.
I can't imagine a teacher who's just put out 30 kids in a class. That's what they do, that's fine. But there you go.
To the next item. We a report on school attainment, I think, didn't we? We did agree that. To the agenda item 6, which is the...
Chair, as Karen has come in, would it be possible for us to go back to
These are the reports we're coming to now. These
And-
are the reports
and-
by the Welsh Audit Office.
And
I
also
think-
and also the item about needs.
On this item as well, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll look at that, yeah.
So if we go through to, part 1. Estin report, improving schools through regional educational consortia. It was noted and referred by the Audit Committee in June 2015. Just wonder whether you've got any comments on this.
I mean, is this the point you think where I might come in and make that recommendation we were discussing pre-agenda about perhaps trying to arrange a meeting with perhaps even Debbie Hartsfeld herself to look at the Welsh Audit Office and Estin report that will be coming in about the EAS. I mean, I understand that they're being inspected in May. I don't know when we're likely to get that report, but I think it may be useful for us as a committee to invite Debbie here, and whoever she wishes to bring, to discuss that report.
Chair, funny enough, I'm at the company board meeting tonight, so I'll see Debbie. And as I've currently got the lead director role for the consortium, I'll be part of the feedback sessions as well. So and get an extra session with Estin too on my own, I think. Lucky me. So I'll be able to feed back messages quite quickly, obviously with Debbie's approval about key themes coming out. I don't know the timescale. The inspection report normally comes out about a month, 6 weeks after the inspection, I would imagine. But this is slightly different. They're not using the same. I don't believe they're using the same judgments for this report, so there may be some variation. I've no doubt that the EAS would wish to make sure that all of its partners are fully aware of the outcomes of the inspection, because this in effect is an inspection of us. Because it's our company, we've commissioned it, and it's all about our schools, and that's certainly the way we're going into the process. So maybe the place to start this, Chair, is that if I ask Debbie's permission to share with you, which I can't imagine there's any issue, the self-evaluation summary document from the EAS, which funny enough I've got one with me, which will give you an insight into where they're making judgments about themselves at the moment, which would then tee up maybe some questions and thoughts for you. And then I'll pick up with her, how she's proposing to feed back to all the to each of the local authorities in due course. But I'm sure that's exactly what you would wish to do in any case. And in terms of any post-inspection action plan that may be required, I'm sure that that's something that we'll have sight of and actually be participating in, because we'll have actions in there for us, I would have thought as well. So if I take that back, try and get some clarity from Debbie, but clearly it would be July at the earliest, I would have thought, before we'd be in a position to have a document. I suspect, if not, after the recess.
I mean, we'd be happy to invite her along to scrutiny committee in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure she'd be happy to do that. If not Debbie, then I'm sure one of the senior officers there. Absolutely.
Is there any other comments that you wanted to make there on the Estin report?
Sorry, members, can I just point out, obviously you need to report back to the audit committee on each of these separately, so can I just confirm that you are satisfied with the updates on those recommendations for that item? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and the next item is the Estin inspection of October 2011 and 2013 monitoring visit. This was sent to us by the audit committee, went to the audit committee in November 13. Okay, I think there's a... Have I? report there on page 56, Achieving Improvement in Schools through Early Regional Educational Consortium and Early View. This was referred on October 2015. Are there any comments on this? Are you happy with that one?
Yeah. Again, to report that you're satisfied with it? Yep, thank you.
Eston report of the inspection of 2011 and 2013. And I think we've got Karen with us now, and I think there were just a few questions we had on the needs item. Yeah.
So I think one of the issues, Chair, was about, which I think has caused certain concern in some quarters, is that while we're delighted with the performance on the measurement given there, is that some of the is we have to ensure that that it's being consistently measured throughout the time as well, on all the various age groups and so forth, and how that's continuing. I think that's something which we are that I know that a concern has been particularly put to me about that the measurement of NEET is this one moment in time, but how does this happen throughout the year? The tracking of it, yes.
The measures relating to 3 age groups, and then a commitment to track the age group with the JSA rate 2 tracking.
Right. Okay. If I can take that in a couple of points. The annual publication by local authority level will remain by Welsh Government as the publication in April of the year 11. So it's a measure on schools. And that isn't going to change. I've got no indication that's going to change from Welsh Government. But in each of the local authorities, they will have the implementation of the Youth Engagement Progression Framework, and as part of that, each local authority gets monthly data from Careers Wales on the numbers of young people that are on the Careers Wales web database, and are categorised in the 5 tiers, with category 1 being not known as to where they are, up through the categories, category 5 being solidly in a post-16 provision somewhere. Now, clearly there are some limitations on that data set. There is no mandation for a 16 to 18-year-old to register with Careers Wales. Obviously, we would encourage them to do so. So the data set in relation to the population is never going to be 100%. So I don't think Welsh Government are ever going to publish data in relation to individual local authorities, because actually it wouldn't be a fair comparison. So, for example, if you think about it, year 12 and year 13 pupils are normally very well known on a Careers Wales database, because their data has come from the schools all the way through the school life. FE colleges do returns as well, but it's not quite the same. Work-based learning training providers, they provide starters and leavers information. But if you have, when the data returns are done, which is why Welsh Government don't publish them on year 12 and year 13, it is only school year 12 and year 13. So, for example, a council such as Blaenau Gwent, which has a completely tertiary, will have no published data for year 12 and year 13, okay? Because they're all in other settings. But as I say, each local authority gets monthly data from Careers Wales, where the population that is known to Careers Wales is recorded as to which tier they're in and movements between the tiers. Now, within Torfaen, we have got a Welsh Accord sharing protocol, which is approved, and we do share name data under appropriate conditions. So we are able, on a monthly basis, through the Keeping in Touch and through the Positive Pathways groups, to monitor that data and to actually have all partners around the table either finding young people who seem to have perhaps disappeared out of the provision, or actually working with and encouraging young people who need to be progressed through the tiers. That data is around about, we've been getting data for about a year, but please bear in mind that obviously the quality of the data, no disrespect to Careers Wales, in the early days it was new data for everybody, but we are in a position now where we can just about start to go, oh, how does it compare month on month, and also how does that data compare with last year? So we're starting to be able to do that. We've got to be very careful with the data set, because drawing conclusions from the data set when some of the movements are as much to do with the age of the young people, because at certain points in the year when the data is still related to, if you like, the academic intake. So at a point in time when young people become 19, some of the data set will start to disappear, and there will be a period of time when the current year 11s, when they turn 16, will start to filter into this data set. So when Positive Pathways looked at it, and we did a piece in the last Positive Pathways meeting, piece of data on it, we felt that there were some differences within the data that were as much to do with age as actual movements, either progression or regression of young people. So we're looking, and we think there will be more intelligence out of the comparison year on year as we develop that data set, because the differences in ages will be the same, because you're measuring the same month against the month. So there is a lot of tracking going on. I would say the strength that Estin found in our partnership through Children and Young People's Improvement Board and all the external partners involved in Positive Pathways and the Keeping in Touch group is that people are working very well together to, one, try and find and hopefully make sure that young person is getting the best support from the most appropriate provision. But we will, I don't think we'll ever get to a place where there will be official Welsh Government statistics that would provide a local authority comparison for all the limitations I discussed there. So if Scrutiny would like more information out of Positive Pathways group, which is the multi-agency group that actually overlooks our needs post-60, well, all the way through, to be honest, then I can certainly provide some information from that group. And if you'd like clearly it would be anonymised data in any publication, any document, but we can certainly provide some narrative on the movements of young people between tiers and typical case studies, for example, or anonymised case studies of stories of young people, if Scrutiny would like it.
Very welcome, isn't it? You all agree?
I'll take that action on. The other, you mentioned the JSA rate. So basically, this is pretty much 18 plus. We have very few young people who are under 18 who actually claim JSA or the new universal credit, because of course we are an area where universal credit is rolled out. They tend to be a small number of young people who are in hardship, so they're estranged from their family. So it's small numbers, and it's somewhere between 4 and 10 at any one time throughout. So pretty much you're talking about the 18 to 24 age group. Because of the rollout of universal credit, the data that DWP supply to us on the rate of the JSA, whether it's falling or rising, is not now as complete as it would have been before universal credit came along. And that's because a single young person with no dependents will automatically be put onto universal credit. And so our JSA rate, as an area with universal credit rolled out, our JSA rate will fall anyway because they're on universal credit. Now, at the moment, DWP, I've had meetings with DWP, they can't disaggregate from their universal credit figures to give us the data of, for example, what would have been a JSA claimant on universal credit. Now, that's something they're looking into, and that's something that we are asking them to be able to provide. To be perfectly honest, when they can provide it nationally is probably when we're going to get it. In reality, a young person from 18, at a point in time when they've been claiming for about a year, are likely to get referred to the work programme. There are sets of conditions when they get mandated to the work programme. They may be invited earlier, and it may be voluntary then, but at a point in time they will get mandated to the work programme, and in order to receive benefits there will be support as well as conditionality applied to those young people. So at what point that population level data will become more complete, I'm in the hands of DWP to answer that one.
Chair, I know we're not here to scrutinise, however, in regarding the amount of young people that fall through the net, if you like, because they don't register as in what sort of percentage are lost, if you like, for want of a better terminology?
It's not, I don't believe, a very large number. If we look at the numbers of young people when they come out of compulsory education, the data set that Careers Wales will have at that point is very good. We make sure of that through our systems with education and schools. So we've got that solid information there. And I think where we find that sometimes in the Careers Wales system, it may be that a young person isn't responding, because we take that data on a monthly basis to the Keeping in Touch group. You've got the whole of the voluntary sector organisations, places like Cwmbran Centre for Young People, Random's, various organisations like that, who will have the information under the sharing protocol, to find out, do they have Joe Bloggs who appears to have not engaged with careers, even though they weren't in some provisions. So we have a whole network of people who go and look for the young person. Similarly, our RSLs, if our last registered address was an RSL, some of the RSLs will take on the tracking and the finding, and then when it's known that a young person either is engaged with an organisation or potentially may have moved from the area, obviously if they've moved there's nothing more that we can do, but if we find we've got a young person who maybe isn't currently in education, employment or training, and we will try and find through the Keeping in Touch group, and as part of the early identification and prevention strategy, we'll look to see who is the best organisation to be the lead worker, the support for that young person. So we will make every effort that we can across the partnership. Now clearly it's voluntary. If we do have a young person that doesn't want to engage for whatever reason, we will still try, and what we're coming up with at the moment is, if you like, a sort of a protocol, I suppose, for a better way of describing it. So if an organisation is attempting to make contact, whether that be our youth service, as say a voluntary sector organisation, RSL, at what point do we say, well, we've tried sufficient times to actually have to say, well, we can't put any more resource into this. Now, we haven't defined it yet, and to be fair to all of the members of the Keeping in Touch group, that's because nobody ever wants to give up. But it's not huge numbers. What I can do is I can give you an example of the data set which would identify the tier ones, but it's in the orders of 10s or 20.
I know we're not scrutinising, however, if you like, call it the last half sentence was basically in response to my question, if you like, but there was an awful lot of run-up into half a sentence, because I'm concerned, if like, in my mind at the moment, I'm going to put it, because it's, if like it's lodged, we are losing 50%. Now hopefully you are going to totally rebut that, if you like, and give me a better percentage than 50%. Just to reassure me, because at the end of the day, I know we're looking at an awful lot of voluntary organisations, but that is a big concern of mine now, if like, because we're not getting the information that is so important to us. So could you give a better answer in regarding the number of percentage? Yes,
well, it won't be 50%, because the national figures for 16 to 18...
The 25% then?
The national figures for 16 to 18 NEETs across Wales, and the 19 to 24-year-old NEETs across Wales are in the order of 8 and 10%, and I'll get the actual figures for you. Now, those are collected on a sample basis, so statistically, as a Welsh figure, they will be statistically as accurate as the definitions that apply to them. They cannot be broken down by local authority area because of the way they're collected. Now, within our numbers that we have, if we have, 98.5% of our school population transitioning effectively at year 11, And if our indications of our 16 to 18-year-olds with Careers Wales is that whilst the numbers might, and they do, get worse as young people get older, there is some fall-off between 16 and 18, we don't believe, given the national projection, which is Welsh Government, if you look at the Youth Engagement Progression Framework, believe...
Chair, we're going into an artery again. If like all I need, please,
Right.
Can you give me, even if it's a between number, if you like, a between percentage of the young people that we are losing? Only roughly. If it's only roughly, if it's between, call it 0 and 10%, I'll go to a 10%. If it's, I need a better figure. No words, just a number, please.
Can I ask what you mean by losing first, please?
Well, I think at the end of the day, if you like, it's amazing because we've been speaking about this for the last 10 minutes, and now you're only just bringing up in regarding the terminology. If you like, in regarding the word losing, is basically, as I understand it, that we have statistics up till the age in which, basically, because we track people up to the age in which they leave, if I call it comprehensive school, after which time they basically can go into higher education, they can go into work, that they can go into form of training. However, as you've pointed out, if like not all of them go to Careers Wales, and so they are lost because we don't know where they are, if you like. And so if we do not know where they are, I'm going to use a word because it's been brought up, I think, to a certain extent. I think you used it to a certain extent. They've been lost, if you like. And so...
Answer that question, Karen.
I need a percentage, please. And it was a simple question, Chair, sorry.
The percentage is going to be somewhere around 10% at worst.
Thank you. Can we move it, please?
But the lost could just as well be employed as unemployed. The point of me saying lost in relation to the Careers Wales database is that that information is not known to Careers Wales.
I'm looking at it from a perspective of Torfaen, if you like, Torfaen. How many from a Torfaen's perspective has been lost at the end of the day?
Would that be better if you put it down in a little report or something, Karen? Would that be easier to do?
I can do that.
Okay, because as we say, we're not scrutinising, it's just... Okay, well, I think we've... Thank you very much. Is there anything else you wanted to raise?
If we have finished, as Karen mentioned, the Centre for Young People, Common Centre for Young People and randoms, I think that it's in order that I declare that I'm the Vice Chair of Common Centre for Young People Management Committee and the Chair of the Randoms Committee.
Okay, we'll just make a note of it.
The Chair of Randoms, yeah, and that's with a Z at the end, R-A-N-D.
Welsh Audit Office report. Oh, okay.
So again, members, you're happy to report back that you're satisfied.
Okay, if we move on then to agenda item 7, date of next meeting.
Chair, I assume I'm okay to go as well. I'm okay to go as well, Chair, yeah?
Can we just wait just to discuss the next item? Just the view, is that okay? Sorry. Okay, so the next meeting is not until the 8th of June. There are 3 potential items that, as a committee, you may be minded to take forward. I've been advised that there's the draft literacy policy, reviewing the early years service is still in your basket, and reviewing exclusions was referred.
Sorry, Rebecca, what was the first one?
The draft literacy policy has been mentioned.
No, there's a piece of work going through the CYPB looking at a literacy policy across the whole partnership. I wouldn't think that I'd be ready to be scrutinised by that point.
So you go back to the two then, you've got the reviewing the early years services or reviewing exclusions.
Chair, bearing in mind discussions that we've had recently in different places around exclusions and attendance, that may well be something that would be helpful to look at, bearing in mind that attendance has been a fairly steady, positive picture, but there are some exceptions that the committee may wish to look at, and exclusions remains persistently concerning.
Are you happy to accept that for the next meeting? Okay.